Probably the most important component for music production is the processor. So when you use a lot of synthesizers and effect plugins like reverb, for example, you need a beefy CPU. When it comes to the Windows side of things, you can choose between Intel and AMD, and I've always been an Intel fan, but Intel dropped the ball over the last couple of years a little bit. You should definitely avoid the 13th and 14th generation processor because of oxidation issues inside the processor. But when it comes to the power draw and heat production, Intel is definitely far behind AMD. With an AMD you can have a powerful processor with a decent sized cooler, whilst with Intel you need to draw 1.2.1 gigawatts.
1.21 gigawatts! 1.21 gigawatts!
And you need a skyscraper of a cooler, which is nearly impossible in laptops. When it comes to the Apple side of things, you can only choose between Apple's M series processors and Apple's M series processors. These are pretty powerful processors and very good for music production. Technically speaking, there is actually a fourth brand, and that is Qualcomm with the Snapdragon X Elite, which is a very good processor for the Windows side of things because it's based on ARM, just like Apple's M series processor. However, there's not much software that supports the processor. With CPUs you have to look out for cores, and generally speaking more cores is better for music production. But regretfully, most software doesn't take advantage of having more than 8 cores. So maximum of 8 cores that you take advantage of. When it comes to Intel and AMD, they work with types of processor. There's a 3 type, so the Core 3 or the Core i3 and the Ryzen 3. And there's also the 5 type, so the Core i5 or the Core 5 or the Ryzen 5. And there's a 7 type, so the Core 7 or the Core i7 and the Ryzen 7. For music production, the 3 type is absolutely too weak. Also the 5 type is a little bit on the weak side. So I would definitely choose a 5 series, at least a 5 series, but preferably a 7 series CPU for music production. And then you might think, well, who am I to tell you about computers? Well, besides that, I'm a DJ for the biggest part of my life. I started producing music in 2016, and I'm also a software engineer by trade. And on top of that, I regularly fill in the local computer store where they sell and repair laptops. I see and hear a lot about laptops and the problems that there are with laptops, and fix them if it's necessary. The processor is important for music production, but also the RAM. When you use more synthesizers than sample-based instruments, then your processor is more important. But when you use more sample-based instruments, you need more RAM. Because all the samples that need to be loaded into the memory in order for your DAW to be able to access them quickly. Nowadays, when you open a browser, you already use 1 gigabyte of memory on top of the memory that your graphics card is using. That leaves very little room for your music. So I would say choose at least 8 gigabyte, but that's a little bit on the low side. So I would say choose 16 gigabytes or more. And when you use a lot of sample-based instruments, I would even go for 32 gigabytes of memory, at least. Luckily, with a lot of Windows laptops, you're able to add memory later if you want, but with an Apple, you can never do that. So take at least twice the amount of memory that you think you're going to need. And yes, that's extremely expensive, but you wanted an Apple, so you chose to pay the Apple tax. From experience, I can say that you will always run out of storage sooner or later, especially when you're a music producer with all your samples and your rendered sub-projects. And sure, you can use an external drive, but it's a pain in the ass to drag it along everywhere you go. And on top of that, the risk of losing it. And yeah, you can duct tape it to the lid of your laptop, but come on. I would say you're pretty safe with 512 gigabytes of storage, but I personally would put a 1 terabyte of storage SSD in my laptop, just to be safe. Gaming laptops, generally speaking, are very good for music production. They are a little bit bigger and therefore better cooled, and they have more powerful processors. But there is also a good graphics processor on board, the GPU, which you don't take advantage of with music production. So an onboard GPU is more than enough. But when you do a lot of video editing or play a game once in a while, a dedicated GPU is nice to have. When it comes to the screen size, I would say pick the biggest screen size possible because you need a lot of space on your monitor to be able to produce stuff. I'd rather use my 4K monitor instead of my 1K monitor, and that's on my desktop. Make also sure that the resolution of your screen is higher, otherwise you just have bigger pixels with more screen size. I would say 17 inch, but 14 inch is absolutely far too small. And the reason I say this is because it's really annoying when you have to scroll a lot vertically or horizontally, and it is really annoying when buttons fall out of plugins because of the screen size that's too small, which I had with my Apple MacBook. I would therefore recommend a screen resolution of at least 1920 by 1080. When it comes to the keyboard, it is really useful to have a backlit keyboard. I recently bought a laptop without it and I really regret it. It's really annoying. It makes such a difference in dimly lit environments like on the couch, but even here on my desktop, I have now a keyboard with a backlight. Okay, and then a topic that I hear absolutely nobody talking about it. Processors and other components in your computer can become very hot, and especially when you put a strain on your computer like you do with music production. You make your processor sweat a lot. And to protect the hardware from overheating, manufacturers slow down laptops, which can result in crackling audio. And even worse is some manufacturers slow down even computers automatically to prevent overheating, which a lot of Apple laptops suffer from. And after an emergency shutdown due to overheating, you need to let your computer cool down a couple of minutes before you can use it again. And that's super annoying when you're just in the middle of a project. Passive cooling is not enough to keep your processor cool. Go for active cooling instead of passive cooling. And with active cooling, I mean there are spinning fans in the laptop, and with passive cooling, there are no spinning fans in the laptop. And especially Apple with the MacBook Air and the iPad has the tendency to make passively cooled laptops. Even actively cooled laptops often underperform due to bad thermal designs and bad fan configuration. The fan kicks, for example, in too late or at a too low speed. And when laptops overheat, that can result in warped and sometimes fried motherboards. And if you don't believe me, Google Apple fried motherboard or Apple warped motherboard. Apple cares more about aesthetics and fan noise than they do about the quality of the internal components of a laptop. Okay, then here are my recommended brands. First of all, Acer, then Lenovo, but yeah, I have to know that some laptops of Lenovo are really good with very good trackpads and other laptops are really bad. And yeah, it's a 50-50 chance if you have a good one or a bad one. Then HP, but also Dell, except the XPS series, but they are going to do a refresh of their lineup, and also Microsoft, but you pay a little bit more for those laptops. Then the brands to avoid. The first one I did a complete 180 on because I have an Asus VivoBook and that thing is terrible. The thermals are terrible, the trackpad is terrible, and especially their service, it sucks. This is a brand new laptop, it still doesn't work properly, and I've still used my old laptop, which I put Linux on. Avoid Asus, it's bad, it's absolutely bad. Then I mentioned already the Dell XPS series because they are notorious for crackling audio, and then I would say Apple because they're bad hardware and they're bad service. Then the specific models I would recommend. The problem is it takes me 3 to 6 months to rank a YouTube video, and by the time you are able to see it, we've had a complete refresh of the whole laptop line, and my advice is old. So what I'm going to do is instead I will link an article in the description to my website, and this article I can update every month with the latest laptop models. So I'd love to see you on my website.